Okay, here we go. Hello, everybody. This is a pre-recorded, non-streamed event hosted by 84 Million. I'm Kyle, and I'm thrilled to have Mr. David Burkett with us today. What do we say about David? Well, he is the shadowy supercoder, self-described on Twitter and possibly elsewhere. I know he's in other areas of the internet and the code groups that I don't read. But he's a pro-libertarian, pro-sound money, pro-privacy advocate who was responsible for the code, which was the largest upgrade in Litecoin history. I think that's a correct statement. And that happened almost 1 year ago, last May, I want to say. So anyway, David, welcome to the show. Just kind of before we start talking, I've got a bunch of questions that we may or may not get to. I hope we can, but we'll see how our time permits. But anyway, let's start with some frivolity. What's your favorite author?
Favorite author? Oh, I wasn't expecting that. All right, so I mean, I don't know if I really have one. So, like, I mostly read nonfiction anymore. Back in my fiction days, I really liked the mysteries, the Dan Brown types, and those sorts of things. But you know, when it comes to nonfiction, you don't really usually have a favorite author.
Indeed.
But well, yeah, not a ton.
I just had to make sure it wasn't the Harry Potter series.
No, I was not into any of the famous stuff. Like none of the things that everyone else was addicted to when we were young. Never did. None of those like 4,000-page novels or anything. I had a childhood, so
that's good.
I didn't read all that.
I don't know if it's good that you didn't read, but
I read, but you know, I read 100 or 200-page little things. I did not sit there for hours on end with a gigantic encyclopedia.
Understood. Well, the good news is you're a linguist, at least to some degree, seeing that you're a coder. So I think you're highly competent with language. I just had to, for everybody watching, I had to throw and I know most of you are going to be Litecoiners, but I'm going to pretend like I don't know much about Litecoin today just for the sake that we can talk to David. And by the way, he's much more involved than I ever will be. But either way, Mimblewimble is the upgrade which we're going to talk about, and that's a term that actually came from Harry Potter. So I had to see if J.K. Rowling was on the radar in your favorite authors. Let's see, Frivolity Part 2. What are you playing on Spotify if you have it?
See, I don't know. I like a lot of different genres. I have like throughout the day, I'll listen to country for an hour, and then next thing you know, I've got hip hop on, and then a little bit later, it's 80s rock. So, you know, there's not really much that I wouldn't listen to. Maybe
yeah.
For the most part, yeah, it's a variety. You should see when I use YouTube usually, and you should see when it tries to mix something for me. It's the most bizarre playlist you've ever come across because it's just up and down all over.
Yeah. That's crazy. I remember we're similar in age. Pardon, folks, we have a busy home today, so you may hear dog, baby. I'm not sure. We're doing our best here. But what was I saying? I remember being younger and having real like religious preferences with music. Like you can listen to this, you cannot listen to this. I was very opinionated, and it's more like, you know, like you, I'm kind of just grazing on playlists and I don't really care and it's all nice and good. But anyway, let's go on to the next one here. Last one. If you weren't coding, if you weren't doing what you do, what would you be doing otherwise?
Something fun. Something like, I don't know, probably, so I'd probably be making no money, first off, but something like, you know, like an amusement park ride operator or something like that. Something thrilling, I don't know. Just sitting behind a desk is probably not, I mean, if it didn't pay well, I certainly wouldn't do it. Let's put it at that. If I hit the lottery, like, that's what I'm going to do. I'm either going to work like some kind of food joint or work at some kind of kid, like anything kids normally work at, that's where I would be. But yeah, I don't really know what career choice I would go with otherwise. I was very clearly fit for coding, so that's just what I did. But I'm not sure what alternatives I would have if I didn't go that route.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What led you to the world of coding?
Um, I was always kind of into computers since very young, and I kind of uh, so I started writing code. Actually, C++ was the first language I learned back in high school, uh, and I did a lot of little projects back then. And then I got more into like um, the IT side of things, network administration. I was a network administrator at local school and some various jobs as that kind of thing. And I went to college and I was an idiot, so I signed up for computer science thinking that was network administration and those kinds of like computery stuff. Turns out it's coding. But I was like, well, I know how to code, so I'm here already. I'll just give it a shot. And I stuck with it. So, good thing I had no idea what I was doing.
Has it been a satisfying journey thus far for
Yeah,
you?
I mean, I enjoy coding. I don't like coding for people, but I enjoy coding. Like, I just want to sit there and write my own stuff, and I don't like any of the busy work that comes along with it. The the documentation, the various tasks you have to do as a developer. I'm very terrible at that stuff. But when it comes to writing code, I absolutely love writing code. Like, I could sit there for hours on it.
Good deal.
I enjoy it. Yep.
That's a good thing. I would think unless, I when I'm not in Litecoin, I'm doing other things in the real world too. I'm just kind of, I graze Twitter and have some websites and do different things, and glad to have these platforms. They're kind of a labor of love for me. I don't have any real income off of them. It's more of a hobby. But I knew, considering I did basic coding because I worked digitally for about 10 years in marketing. Generally speaking, I was a copywriter and wrote a lot of political campaigns and worked on different stuff. Lived in DC for a little while and said I don't need to be in the heart of the empire, and I I left, and I'm glad I did. But either way, I did some basic coding. I didn't write any programs, nothing even close. More like just HTML and things like this. But there was a time where I thought it would be a fascinating endeavor, and I did linguistics in my wasted undergrad. Although I loved it, it just, how's it paying me now? Of course, it's not. But either way, it was a fascinating mental experiment. Those few years under some of my professors with syntax and semantics and everything else. So I thought there might be a natural inclination for me to go the way you did. I never did. But my philosophy was like, dude, our age is digital, and unless the power goes out, there's going to be opportunities. And you're building actually on money, which we'll get to, which is a pretty unique and amazing thing. But before we go there, I need to talk about the elephant in the room on Twitter. And kind of some recent developments with Litecoin and the Litecoin community. Started with the Bitcoin community. I'm referring to Ordinals. Ordinals, I couldn't tell you authoritatively all about the ordinal theory, et cetera, et cetera. Perhaps you can. But I'm curious of what your opinion is about it, and maybe you could share a little bit with us. I know that you didn't work on it, but perhaps you have some knowledge I don't about what are ordinals, what are they, and what are we going to do with this now?
Yeah, so I didn't dig a whole lot into the exact implementation, but basically they're spam for a blockchain. You have JPEGs that you like. You could store these things anywhere, and you could just commit to a small hash, like a hash of the image, and you could have an owner of it, something like that. And you would have yourself some form of NFTs that you could send back and forth. But Ordinals, they actually store the whole image and all this garbage on chain, and it's a gigantic waste of block space. It's spam. It's spam for blockchain. It's not like a huge threat to the coins any more than any other form of spam would be. It wastes block space. It makes syncing a lot slower and more difficult than it needs to be at this stage. But at some point, it's inevitable that we're going to deal with spam anyways. So this kind of just speeds up that process, gets us there quicker. I was kind of hoping that we'd have faster ways of syncing or more efficient ways of encoding data, encoding transactions before we really start getting flooded with these useless transactions, but we don't yet, or at least not implemented. There are ways that we could when it comes to like the initial sync, we could have fancy zero knowledge proofs that like get us up to speed, like get a node synced quickly and verifiably without having to download the whole history of everything. But for now, that's not implemented or anything. So you have to download every transaction in history, at least on the traditional Litecoin side. And so having all these ordinals filling all the spam, filling up each block, it makes for an unnecessarily long initial sync time and discourages people from running nodes, which I think is a shame.
Interesting. I like the idea. Well, I can understand the idea of calling it spam, crypto spam. Is it at least local though? Like, I'm not going to get an ordinal that I didn't want. Well, somebody could send it to me because if they don't coin control, they could actually end up being in me. But that's irrelevant. If I get paid with a light that has an inscription on it, I don't care necessarily. We might talk about risks later. But like, for example, Ethereum. I have one address, and there's all sorts of airdrops of coins. You can't even trim, cut, or anything. And if you're importing all that blockchain data automated, you're seeing all this junk. That's actually like spam. Like, is that the case with ordinals too?
Well, you don't run a node for Ethereum, typically.
Right.
It's too heavy, it's too bloated. It's just not really a thing. It's not very decentralized as a result, not to the same degree that Litecoin and Bitcoin and others are.
Right, correct.
So even though, it's harmless to have this extra little junk, or mostly harmless to have this extra junk in your wallet, it's not the wallet that really concerns me, it's the node. And it's the fact that every full node has to download all this data and verify all this data. It just discourages people from running nodes, so it's less decentralized as a result. Like I said, it's an inevitable problem. Like, it's not, blockchains are not very efficient storage mechanisms. They're actually terribly efficient intentionally. That's the way they're designed. They're, extremely redundant. It's just a terrible data storage mechanism. So it's always known that spam will cause, lots of slowness, and the fee market is supposed to prevent that. But up until now, we've had a luxury on Litecoin where we haven't really had to deal with much of a fee market. There's been plenty of block space for the financial transactions that have been included in blocks already. So you never really have to worry about, is my fee high enough? Or am I going to have to wait 6, 8, 12 blocks for this to get in? The same way you do with Bitcoin. Now, like I said, it was inevitable that we get there. It's just, Ordinals really speeds that up, and it's a shame. Like, it's we have to deal with, which I don't think it's really bad. I think the hype's kind of died down now, so hopefully it stays that way.
Yeah.
But it could come back, and if it does, if people start attaching monetary value to these ordinals on Litecoin, then I think you'll definitely see a huge increase in them, and then the fee market issue will be here to stay.
Yeah, interesting. So it's more like node spam, and it will be
it's not
competition with you. Let's say I don't have a
node.
node, I just want to send Litecoin. It's competition for me to get my Litecoin from A to B because the nodes have to deal with all this other stuff, regardless of whether I'm participating or I'm getting my wallet spammed with inscriptions. Yeah,
anybody who's sent both Litecoin and Bitcoin can tell you that Litecoin is a better experience because you don't have, first off, it's cheap. You can send it real easy, real cheap. And almost always it's in the next block, which is on average within 2.5 minutes. So you get quick confirmations because of that with low fees, and it's just a much better experience, which is why we our usage on different payment gateways and stuff. our usage is really growing. People tend to favor Litecoin over all the other alternatives because of that. And if we end up spamming our chain the same way that Bitcoin back in 2017 during the block space wars, all that spam that led to Bitcoin basically being unusable for a while, or having to spend $30, $40, $50 just to send small amounts of Bitcoin across the network. It doesn't make for a good experience. And that's what Ordinals will do for Litecoin in the short term. If they really do take off and continue the problem.
Well, I've looked through the database, because I admittedly did buy one just to see how it worked. And then I'm like, wait a minute, I have to coin control this single unit so I don't send it by accident in my pool of Litecoin. So it's really complex. It's really complex if you want to get involved. Otherwise, you can hold it for 10 seconds and it might be out the door if you're transacting in Litecoin. So definitely if you're getting into Ordinals, you have quite a bit of setup. At least the user experience now is pretty terrible. I imagine it will improve so we can control our little bits better downtime. It's interesting because I have concerns about Ordinals, but I also realize I'm one person in an ecosystem that I can't control, So, but I appreciate this dialogue, especially with you, to kind of see what the heck is this going to do to the network. I agree that it was community funded. Indigo on Twitter kind of put a bounty out, and I think that's a great community effort that we can get stuff done kind of in a...
I don't fault anyone for developing this or anything. It's just, it doesn't provide value. I know a lot of people want to really buy into the hype and they want to say, Litecoin's got Ordinals too. You should come to Litecoin. But people don't come to Litecoin for Ordinals. It's not the advantage of Litecoin. The advantage of Litecoin is financial transactions, easy, cheap, fast. There's no stress. You just send money, and these actually make that a lot worse. It takes away from the real value proposition of Litecoin. So I wish the big Litecoin influencers that were really interested in Ordinals better understood that these are actually a detriment to what Litecoin excels at.
Yeah.
Like I said, spam's here to stay anyways. It's always going to be a problem. It's a major problem with decentralized UTXO-based blockchains. There's nothing we can do to really prevent that aside from a fee market. That's what that solves. The game theory is there already, but it makes it less convenient to use Litecoin if we end up continuing to fill blocks, which we haven't been yet. Let's hope it stays that way.
It's mind-numbing to scroll through all the images. I was looking back again. I did buy just to see how it worked, and I was scrolling through, and I'm like, oh my gosh. I felt like my IQ was lowering. Just like, what is this that I'm looking at? And again, personal opinions. I speak for myself. We're just having a chat here. I don't know what other people want to do, but we'll see. We'll see what happens with it. Again, I think it's just in the air right now. The only negative, and I kind of DM'd you about this at one point, because and this is on Bitcoin too. I think Doge doesn't have it yet, but then I've heard of Doginals. I don't follow it, but maybe they're trying to work something out with Doge. My concern is if you have and again, this gets to be, the liberty versus some mechanism of control. My concern was, what if some person with nefarious intention put some illegal content on it as an ordinal? You can't stop it. Would that bring, because the government's already on cryptocurrencies, and we are a cryptocurrency. We're not a token. Litecoin is a cryptocurrency. I would argue it is a digital commodity, if we want to use the language of the state, right? But, there's already lots of pushback and regulations, and we need clarity, and it's great, and all that stuff. All of us are aware of it. And that could be one thing used to really say, don't touch this stuff. It's a decentralized distribution system for whatever might have been uploaded. And has that happened with Bitcoin before?
Yeah. I don't know if it's Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash, but I do remember several years back now, some illegal images being posted using just like some I think just some off data in one of the transactions, like blob
Interesting.
of legal image. I don't know the details, and I'm not going to Google the details.
No, I
don't
wouldn't.
want to go to prison today, but there were. I recall an incident a few years back where something like that was uploaded, and if that was done in the past, it's still there.
And that's my concern, because if somebody wanted to look at that, they could, and really bring a hammer on whatever.
Ordinals aren't really the problem there. Like the fact that you can put any kind of arbitrarily encoded data in transactions is the issue, and we've always been able to do that.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
That's I think a good response. This is nothing new. It's just a new format.
Like MWEB and MWEB, you can also store arbitrary encoded data. The pure MWEB protocol, you can't do that. So it was like kind of an advantage of that. But we have like non-interactive transactions, and we allow soft forks, and ours is very flexible. So we actually added that back in to where you could also do it in there. But like, one cool thing about the pure MWEB based transactions is they don't have that. They don't have that flexibility. So, it's a more rigid transaction structure, which prevents that sort of arbitrary encoding of data.
So we just hinted to MWEB. I want to talk about that next because that's kind of the big one, but still kind of hanging out on the ordinals territory. If I send an inscribed Litecoin, fragment of Litecoin into Mimblewimble, or 15 or 50 or whoever many, we start sending ordinals into MWEB. What happens when we pull out? Lottery?
So I don't see. This is where I don't know enough about ordinals.
Fair enough.
Are you sending the image each transaction, or does it all just like?
Well, I think it's attached to the piece. I think it's like attached to the piece.
Send reattaches that same piece of spam.
I think so, because if I go buy a CryptoPunk and I have my little deposit in my wallet of a CryptoPunk, and I send that CryptoPunk to my MWEB wallet, it'll go. It's still Litecoin, but I'm wondering if I pull out, or someone else pulls out, they could get a CryptoPunk.
Or does it look at the history of it and know that this was once that CryptoPunk, and then now anyone who owns this UTXO forward? I mean, it probably does just copy it each time. I'm not sure. It depends on the implementation of Ordinals, but you're sending it to. You would be sending it to the MWEB, so there's not really it doesn't come back. Like the owner of it then would have been would be that integrating transaction, the last transaction in the traditional block, and then it's not going to copy that data forward.
So that's interesting. So, because I know if you have if you buy your, I'll say it again, like CryptoPunk or Litecoin Punk or whatever, there's an inscription number which you can look up, plug in, and you can actually see it. It's like, this is the one. So obviously, if you sent that into MWEB and somebody pulled out on somewhere else in the MWEB environment, pulled out and they got it, they wouldn't know to even, unless that inscription data carries with the
Well, see, that's the
piece.
thing. Like the inscription data, if it's copied in each output, or I guess it's part of the input maybe. If it's copied in each send, well, it can't be then. It's lost then, because you don't copy it. The integrating transaction is not going to copy it. It's a very rigid format. It's a standard format. There is no arbitrary data in that transaction.
So would MWEB purge ordinals essentially?
Well, you still have the history that is the real, the real nuisance of but you can't send them on MWEB. So
Okay.
Not yet, anyways.
Okay.
It's over there, which they'd be better implemented over there, because you can prune them at least. You don't have the whole history. Anyone who wants to sync a new node won't necessarily have to download all the old ordinals.
Yeah. Well, sir, let's go to MWEB. How about that? Let's shift. This is your domain. It's a really, really important aspect that Litecoin has, and no other, as I say, Nakamoto coin has it. Bitcoin doesn't have it. Doge doesn't have it. Of course, there's the forks of the forks too, which I won't even bring those up. But this is a unique feature of a very prominent cryptocurrency, namely Litecoin, the original altcoin. So MWEB, the Mimblewimble extension block, it went live post testnet last May. I think it was May 20th or 23rd or something around that. I think testnet was happening last year at this time per a tweet from the Litecoin Foundation within the last week or so. So tell us about MWEB.
Okay. MWEB is it's a privacy layer. It's an extension block, which is it's almost like, I mean, it's an additional block attached to the main blockchain. So each block has its own extension block attached to it, which has a different set of rules for how you transact, and it follows the MWEB protocol, which it encrypts the value and the address, the receiving address. So there's, it's a more private way of sending coins, and then it's prunable to where you don't have to download the whole history of like for syncing regular Litecoin node, you have to start at the beginning, and each block you have to download in full because you need to see which coins go where, and make sure they can all trace back to a valid coin base, to make sure there were no double spends and anything, no inflation or anything like that. With Mimblewimble, you really only need the UTXO set, the unspent coins, as well as a small piece of each transaction, the pass called the kernel. And given that, you can verify the current state of the chain. So I hate to say a more efficient way of encoding, because actually the transactions are much larger. In order to encrypt the amount, you have to attach this thing called range proof, which is like it's almost a kilobyte. It's a huge cryptographic proof that you have to attach to each output. But you don't need all of the history involved. You don't need to see each spend. All you need is the latest version, or the latest set of outputs, and the tiny little kernels that go with them, in order to verify the whole thing. So it's just like in the long term, it's theoretically more scalable. It's definitely, at least from the point of like initial block download, you should be able to sync a node faster with MWEB versus, using Mimblewimble versus a traditional UTXO based. So.
Very cool. Why privacy on Litecoin? Why is it important? And how private is MWEB?
So why privacy? Right now, if you use your wallet to send to someone else, and you're not careful about how you build your transaction, or the way it works is you point to coins that you have in your wallet when sending something. You say, hey, I own these coins, I want to send this amount to this person, and then the change will come back to me. But in order to do that, you point to coins that you own and the amounts. So let's say that I send you 5,000 Litecoin, and then you want to send one for your coffee or whatever you're buying with one Litecoin. I guess it'd be more than coffee. It's something.
Ordinals. Sorry.
Yeah. So for your ordinal, and someone knows that you also have 4,999 other Litecoins still, because they can see them in the inputs, they can see the change going back, and it makes it like less convenient for things like receiving your salary. Let's say you want to receive your salary via Litecoin. Well, then every 2 weeks or a month, or however often you get paid, there's the same amount going into an address on chain, and people can quickly realize that, this person's getting this much salary. And then let's say that you interact with them, suddenly you know how much they make each year. And there's just all kinds of, basic privacy has existed for money forever. It's a fundamental characteristic of money, is that you don't have to have the whole history of that currency attached to it. You just spend it. It's each piece holds its own value without, all this other baggage attached to it. But that's different in the digital world, at least for the blockchain world, where you have like each coin you spend has its own history, and you can learn a lot about the person spending it, or who they've worked with, or, who they've dealt with in the past, and all kinds of different things. It's just, you wouldn't want your credit card statement online, you wouldn't want your bank account statement online, neither should you have your whole wallet history available to everyone who you interact with. It's just, nobody should want that, I would hope, for pretty obvious reasons. And that's what MWEB gives. It hides the amounts, it obscures all the links between the past spends of coins. There's still, you asked how private is it? It's not anything that's gonna, if you're committing a crime, that's MWEB's not the tool to use, and it's not because I don't think you should commit crimes. You should certainly commit certain.
We don't make statements on crimes.
I know, yeah, I'm not. Like, as a libertarian, I'm not about to tell you not to commit a crime. Sorry.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying it's not the coin to use. There are much better ones. A targeted attack, especially by a government or a state actor, something of that scale, it's not going to hold up against that. The amounts are still very well hidden for the most part. Like if you peg in and write back out, like if you move a normal Litecoin, Litecoin transaction, send your MWEB address and then write back out, or maybe use it a little and then back out, you have almost no privacy. Mm-hmm. But if you use if all of your transacting occurs on the MWEB and you're not going back and forth, you get very good amount privacy. The amounts you are transacting in, the salary you get each month or whatever, that is well hidden. It is obscured. There's nothing really that anyone can do to figure out those amounts. But as far as the links, finding, kind of tracing the history of coins, and a targeted attack by resourceful attackers, that's governments or whatever, can certainly, at least statistically, it's not pure privacy. They can learn a lot. Yeah. They may not be able to right away, but they're like, you interact with enough people, they can trace back enough of the history to figure out that there's a good chance that you could be, or these several people could be, involved in some maybe financial crime or whatever that took place. But another big privacy advantage is you don't have, it uses stealth addresses. So like, I get paid in crypto for several different things. I work on Litecoin being one of them. Mm-hmm. And so I just have like a public address that I share for that. And so everyone can see when I receive money. They can see when I cash it out. They can see all kinds of other stuff. With MWEB, you have stealth addresses. So it's the same as if every time people sent to me, they use a different address. It's like I gave them a one-time address every time. So you don't have the problem of address reuse where, you learn someone's address and then you can see each time that someone sends to that address. You don't have that with MWEB. It's each send uses its own one-time key based off the stealth address. There's all kinds of advantages over basic. There's all kinds of privacy advantages over basic Litecoin sends, but it's not to the narrow Zcash level where you can like obscure your identity enough to really stump the Chainalysis people.
Yeah. I think it's definitely a step in the right direction. Mm-hmm. I think part of that, if I remember Charlie Lee at one point, and this was before MWEB even launched, but he was talking to you and talking about this for quite some time on Twitter and et cetera. So I believe part of it's kind of, he says it's kind of like, you can have a glass house, or you can have basically like it's not a stone wall, but let's say a stone fortress with no light going in at all. Mm-hmm. Or you can have the modern house, which has mostly walls but a few windows, and it's a nice compromise of privacy and transparency.
Yeah, he's good at analogies. I would love a stone house that.
Like,
um,
fair enough.
I want perfect privacy,
Go
but
live in a
the
cave.
thing is, like, there's not a good technical way to do perfect privacy. The two examples I used were Zcash and Monero, which don't have perfect privacy, but have, Zcash has at least pretty damn perfect theoretical privacy. There's other limitations. And then Monero has statistically very good privacy,
Yeah.
but it's still statistical. But Monero scales like shit. It's terrible. It's horrible scaling. And Zcash also has some scalability issues due to the complexity of the algorithm, but also just due to the complexity of the algorithm. Like, I couldn't do it. I couldn't code it for you. You couldn't find anyone to code it for you. Like, Zcash has this whole team of engineers working on their algorithm, and they still introduce like critical consensus bugs, that critical inflation bugs that, like, they have to fix in secret and whatever you find out later. It's super complex.
Don't they have an annual, I don't know if it's annual, that's a typical calendar system, but don't they have a normal like dump routine of certain data they gotta like, you have to trust them to like obliterate? There's some sort of ritual with Zcash, right?
There was a ritual at the beginning in order to, there's like a ceremony that was performed in order to set up the initial Zcash. They're no longer under that. So that's a lot of the.
So it's more trusted now than before.
Criticism of Zcash was that trusted setup, but like, and they still are kind of limited by it. But the way it works now is like there's a turnstile, and like they have to, any new transaction has to use this new format, and any old transaction that was part of like the old trusted setup has to go through this turnstile thing, and only the 21 million Zcash can ever go through there. So if ever there was some kind of inflation issue that was introduced by their trusted setup, like you can't just, you don't have to worry about like infinite coins printed because of that, because the turnstile thing will kind of prevent that. Like, you'd be first out. And as far as we can tell, there was never an issue like that, because there hasn't been more than 21 million coins attempt to come through. So you don't really have you don't have to worry too much about the trusted setup anymore, because there's now a new system that's even better, and it's theoretically not trusted, but you still have to trust the handful of scientists in the world.
That's what I mean. There's still kind of,
but that's only
there's humanity mixed in with it.
Trust. You still trust a handful of people that MWEB works. Like,
right.
As much as I'd like to think there were thousands of eyes on the code, there were like 7. And there's probably been a handful more now, but you still, there's unless you're out there reading the code yourself, you're still trusting me and the auditors and other developers who've looked at it. The various hackers out there who've probably tried to steal money from it and failed. So, there's not a huge list of people that torn into the code. So you're trusting to a degree, but the number of people that could audit the code pretty thoroughly is much higher for something like MWEB than this extremely complex zero-knowledge system that Zcash is based on. And that's why we don't have something like that on Litecoin, is it's just technically not feasible.
And in terms of supply limits, auditability, there will never, as it says on the wristband on the front of the website 84million.com, there will never be more than 84 million Litecoin. That is still verifiable with MWEB.
Yes, verifiable. And if ever there was like an issue, say the range proofs had some kind of flaw in them where you could somehow, or maybe like there's some like randomly generated public keys that like if anyone ever determined the relationship between them, they could use it to inflate the MWEB side. But just like the system I mentioned for Zcash, where only 84 or 21 million could ever be in this new system, like you can never have more coins peg out than ever pegged in. So like if ever there was concerns of inflation, you could move your coins off the MWEB and like verify that there were only 84 million of them, or there were never more. You can't just like print, you can't inflate coins on the MWEB side and then bring those coins back to the Litecoin side. That there would be an obvious problem there in existing consensus rules.
And that's where it would break. Yeah.
Yeah.
Break in a good way, meaning sequester any possible inflation.
And it would still suck. It would still really suck because it would be like a race out, first one out, and everyone's stuck and MWEB's stuck. But the protocol is simple enough that you can easily verify. And, it doesn't take, this doesn't take some super genius cryptographer to go verify the supply of this thing. It's basic key addition, public key addition, to go verify the supply. It's something that I can sit down with anyone in a half hour, have them understand at least, how the theory of how it all works. It's something that's very easy to verify.
I've heard that Zcash and Monero we can't ultimately suggest they're limited, or you can't verify the max supply.
Monero is based off a similar system of verifying the supply.
Okay.
But yeah, Zcash is more complicated. I don't understand Zcash, so I shouldn't speak up.
Yeah. And this isn't to diminish Zcash. I think there's a place in the world for Zcash. I just think the neat thing of what you've done and what Litecoin is it's got privacy, but it's also like auditable and verifiable, which is super. There's less trust, not zero perhaps, because we just mentioned, coders and you got a team and you're working on it. But overall, it's pretty straightforward, which is super. In terms of, so another thing I want to mention is the extension block is on chain. Bitcoin has Liquid. That is a second layer. Am I correct? Can you compare MWEB to Liquid? Because a lot of maximalists would say, Bitcoin's private with Liquid, yet it's not on chain. Not saying there's not a use case for it, but it's not on chain. And leaving the chain is a compromise, and there's benefits and also disadvantages to leaving the chain.
Yes. So the benefits of leaving the chain is that existing nodes don't have to change. Like the Liquid is it's a multi-sig. It's a multi-sig that a handful of trusted actors that are part of some committee, some Liquid committee, have to sign off on each transaction there, and then they maintain the ledger for all of the Liquid side of things for all the transactions that occur on on the side chain. That's called a side chain. And it's, if they decide they want to change the rules for how things work, to add in new features, better privacy, and then something else, they can do that without having to worry about getting consensus amongst all of the nodes on the network. They only have to worry about the 10 or 20 key signers, that the multi-sig owners. So it's a small committee that can set up rules on how they, on what transactions they allow, and no node has to know anything about those in order for that to continue to work. It doesn't affect any of the existing nodes on the network, the decisions they make. Whereas with extension blocks, miners have to know they have to know how they work, because they have to build blocks that follow the new Mimble, the new MWEB protocol, and any upgraded node has to verify all the consensus rules are met, and if they weren't, you would have a chain fork of, you would have a consensus disagreement. You could split the network or something, but as long as there's enough upgraded nodes, which there are, you don't have to worry about that. But it's part of consensus. That's the big scary consensus algorithm. It's part of that. Whereas a sidechain, it's not. A sidechain is just it's a separate, individual or group of individuals or some other network that maintains all the rules for those transactions. And when you use it, you basically just send your coins to some multi-sig address that they, that they then use for controlling all their transactions.
Last thing on MWEB, mobile wallets. I know you've been working on that. How close are we to seeing MWEB supported on mobile, Light Wallet, or or maybe you can share with us, is anybody talking to you, any wallets talking to you about integrating it at this time?
Yeah, I don't know how far any have gotten. It almost seems like I might have to try to run with that somewhere on one of, whether it's on Light Wallet or something else. I have the peer-to-peer messages available. I hosted a node that had those and have done some testing myself, but as far as having anyone actually adopt it, it hasn't happened yet. And I should be doing better about reaching out and getting people to do this. But just also like, let me know once you have this wallet, and once a wallet's implemented it, so I know where, so I can use that as an example and go off of it. And it's like, well, I just implemented it. So it's hard to get that first one to take the step.
But after the first one, it can cascade because it's proved.
Hopefully, yeah.
That would be super. I know a lot of people in the community are really, we'll get to a Q&A later. By the way, are we good on time?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. We'll get to a Q&A, and there's just a lot of folks that are looking forward to a mobile wallet with MWEB support. So you're already working on it. That's the good news. It's just we got to have some wallets pick it up. I know Cake has been very friendly to Monero, Bitcoin, and Litecoin, fascinatingly enough. Yeah. You'd think they would want to support something like MWEB.
They want, and they want to do it in a really nice way, a really private, privacy-preserving way.
Very nice.
So they actually probably won't have a good example they can base theirs off of. They'll have to, the messages I've set up for the protocol have support a number of different trade-offs when implementing this, and it would support their workflow as well. But part of it is I'm not very good at documentation, so I need to get better at that, or someone needs to step up.
Do we need to organize a bounty to get you more organized with documentation? I'm kidding.
Or find a technical writer that wants to step up and do it.
Yeah.
There's
a call to the community.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's anyone ever wants to write my documentation, you are more than welcome to.
Okay. You've heard it here first, folks. Anyway, I'll share that a little bit beyond this conversation too. I'll put a tweet out and see what we can do to help you, because you've been doing a lot of the work here. If not, well, I'll leave it at that. And we're grateful for what you're doing, David. I'm going to go to just money generally, and then we'll go to the Q&A. I'm going to bypass all the SEC stuff because it's dry and boring, and who cares? So let's just talk about generalism now. So what attracted you to Litecoin?
A long history. So I got into the space. Well, I was first interested in Bitcoin back in the early days, 2011. And it, from a libertarian hard money side of things, I was I was working on the Ron Paul campaign. I was really into gold and hard money and the young people and their libertarian idealism. That was me. Bitcoin came along, and it seemed like such a cool invention. Like, wow, this is both hard money and uncensorable, and like all the great stuff that everybody originally loved about Bitcoin. No longer seem to care about it, but I still do. And so I kind of got interested on the money side of things. Didn't invest because I was an idiot, and it was really complicated. But
the user experience was pretty terrible.
Well, yeah, they wanted my firstborn when I was trying to sign up for an exchange, and I didn't have my firstborn, so it made it kind of tricky. Back then it was really hard to get an exchange account set up, and I I wasn't prepared to start mining it. I was pretty clueless on the technical side. Even though I was a very technical person, I never, for some reason, I wasn't interested at the time in the Bitcoin tech too much, aside from just the very basics. And then 2013, I started to get a little more interested in it, still from the financial side mostly. I started to invest in it, use it a little bit. It was cool. But then it took several more years before I really even started to learn how it worked. It was like probably 2016. And then I read the Bitcoin white paper. So, all the stuff I've read about Bitcoin up to that point is just high-level BS from people who also didn't understand it and claimed they did. And then I read the Bitcoin white paper, which I expected to be super complicated, but it was not. If you haven't read it, read it, understand it. It's like 8 pages long, and it is the best introduction to Bitcoin ever written, hands down. So don't think that you're gonna. All the people out there looking for, can I get a TLDR on that? That is the TLDR. Okay?
Yeah.
Go download it. Nobody explains Bitcoin like Satoshi explained Bitcoin in that white paper. So go download it, spend some time with it. It is the best introduction to Bitcoin out there. It explains exactly how it works. And you only have to trust a few basic primitives, like what a hash function does and what public key cryptography does. As long as you trust that all the math works behind the scenes on that stuff, which is used everywhere throughout the internet, then you can, as long as you learn the basics of how that works, then you can completely understand how Bitcoin is, how Bitcoin works at a base level. And so I read that and I was like, wow, this is actually, Bitcoin's not simple. Like there's all these different weird edge cases and like the game theory is super complex and it's a miracle that it all works out. But to understand how transactions occur, how value is transferred from one address to another is pretty straightforward. It's very clever and I highly recommend it. At like 90% of the technical questions I get asked, if someone spent the time to read 8 pages and understand it, then it would be quite obvious what the answer to all these technical questions would be. Like, read that, understand that. Then, if you have technical questions, I'd love to talk about it. But that's the place to start. It will answer nearly every question you have about the tech of Bitcoin. But I read that and I was like, oh, this is really cool. I'm going to start contributing. So I started contributing to small projects. And like a little later on, I got interested in privacy. I was really interested in the scalability side of things. At that time, we had the block size wars going on, the chain wars. And so I was like, I heard about Mimblewimble and how it was like, you don't have to download the whole history. I thought it was going to be more efficient than it really is, but still, it was this huge, this huge scalability technology that also brought privacy along with it. So it was like a win-win. 2 things I wanted to see more of on Bitcoin, and there it does it all in one. So Grin was being worked on at the time. I decided to step in there, see what they could, see how I could help, and it turned out they were a bunch of super nerds who like had a console only and like nothing usable, and they're like, yeah, we're gonna launch in a few months here, and I'm like, launch what? Like nobody can use this damn thing. So I was like, well, I don't know how to make my own. It didn't work on Windows, like there was no UI, nothing. So I was like, why don't I just go from a Windows side, make my own node. The protocol is simple enough. I'll learn how the protocol works as I make a node, and then I'll do like. And then I'll go from the wallet side and make something usable that Windows users can use. And I didn't quite have it ready by launch, but like within a month or 2 of launch, we had Grid Plus Plus. It was the Windows compatible version that had a easy to use wallet and everything. And so that was like my first big project in crypto, and from there like worked on it a while, and then. I saw that Charlie was interested in adding first confidential transactions, and maybe Wimble to Litecoin. Litecoin is like, I love Litecoin. It was so easy to use. It was still doing the one thing I cared the most about, which is transferring value from person to person in an uncensorable way. Like it was still money. It was still trying to be money, and I was like, well, yeah, this is a great place to contribute. So I stepped in. I offered to help with that project, and that's how I got here. Next couple of years, worked on that, and here we are.
Very good. Very good. I came into Litecoin. I knew about it second to Bitcoin. I didn't get any of it. I think for a little while in like 2013, I tried to mine it on an iPad.
Yeah.
My big story is I had a friend of mine he was an Air Force guy and super techie. He built these little prospectors. In 2013, there was a Republican Liberty Caucus meeting in Texas. And I met him there with another friend of mine. We were in California at the time. But he was selling these little machines for like $400 called the Prospector. And it would have been mining. There was one for Bitcoin and one for Litecoin. He's like, Litecoin's awesome. It's faster, it's cheaper, it's, silver to Bitcoin's gold, all those sort of things, which I still believe in. But the conversation was so different then. What was it, $1 or $2 a coin back then? And they're like, I don't know, it doesn't justify the electricity because we're in our 20s. We don't have, we're less. Economics was more trim when you're in your 20s, right? Versus when you grow with families and God willing, we, continue. But they always say the middle generations have the most wealth. So when you're younger, you don't have a lot,
Yeah.
God willing, we can preserve it with the inflation, right? But
Yeah.
Our monetary system aside, that was kind of the thing back then. He had these little miners. It would have been the mining rewards would have been higher, and the difficulty would have been much simpler. Yet $400 to buy this machine from the guy who built it, it didn't justify the electricity to plug in. He's like, it's okay, just take it to Starbucks and plug it in there for like. This is how we talked back then,
Yeah.
It's like we believed in it, but we almost didn't believe in it, and it wasn't really liquid. But it's like just imagine. So anyway, it's no regrets for me. Like you, I kind of came in. Sadly, I share libertarian values, I believe, with you, or principles. And, I was pretty hard-nosed against it, Bitcoin and Litecoin in the beginning, because of folks like Peter Schiff, who's, Austrian and sound money and gold and silver, and we don't need this stuff. I've since parted my ways with him. Sadly, he's just, not going to budge, it seems now. But I believe with the general principles and the time tested of gold and silver. I like gold, I like silver, but why not gold, silver, Bitcoin, and Litecoin, right? You can fit a little more in the basket. And but that prevented me from really getting in the early days too. Just my staunch opposition to it.
Against it. And I never really understood. To me, right away, it was like, this is it. You'd think I'd be smart enough to invest, but no, I was like, this is it. This is, this is the thing.
Right.
And I got it right away. But a lot of the people that were big influence on my thinking back then did not. Like like you said, the Peter Schiffs of the world. But Peter Schiff was, like, I learned quickly, he was actually kind of an idiot who just keeps repeating the same thing over and over and over and over and over.
Yeah.
As long as he gets mad enough about it, then people don't question him. It's just like, okay.
Yeah.
He must know his stuff. No, he doesn't. He's just lying.
No, I mean, he's incorrect about Bitcoin and Litecoin.
Yeah. But like there was a lot of the Austrians who were very hesitant early on, for a long time. But most of them by now have come around on it. There's still a few gold bugs out there that may never change, but for the most part, they've all come around. But to me, earlier on, despite having all of those gold hard money influences, like Bitcoin just clicked. It was like, this is great. It's cool stuff.
It's interesting, though, to see the transition of Austrianism to oppose cryptocurrency in defense of, let's say, a metallic standard, which was proven by history, which I agree with. Again, why not all of them? Yet now I find that the more high-profile Austrians are very close to maximalists. And that upsets me as well, because they're almost a Bitcoin only crowd now. They've conceded to cryptocurrency, but they're the most outspoken ones, the ones you see on podcasts and things like that. They're mostly touting Bitcoin. And I understand Bitcoin can be considered, and it is, the reserve currency of cryptocurrencies. It's like the US dollar to fiat is Bitcoin to crypto. Something like that, I think, is a reasonable comparison or analogy. But, if you want to look at the root of Austrianism, or at least one of the more recent influences, Ludwig von Mises, right? Mm-hmm. I don't think he was a maximalist of any kind other than if the market proved the maximalism. Mm-hmm. In other words, if the entire world chose Bitcoin independently without coercion, we can all be maximalists. But I think he always promoted competition and things like this, where you can have a few things in the winning pot, or a few things that people want, or maybe thousands of things that people want. It depends on human behavior, human action. And I would agree that most of the capital has gone to Bitcoin. So there's proof enough to say the strength of Bitcoin, and I don't argue with it. But the maximalists have gone beyond that these days. I feel that it's basically Bitcoin is the only cryptocurrency for all things, and I just think that's incorrect. I think that's lost its way, even in terms of Austrianism. So this is fascinating.
If you look at the academic Austrian economists, the guys, the more academic focused ones, they tend to be much more open to alternative currencies. There were a lot of the early Austrian influencers who were like single currency. We've seen what happens with silver and gold, but like with silver and gold, you always had one peg to the other artificially by government, and that's why you would run into like shortages. And, the bad money would push out the most of the academic minded Austrians were very open to competing forms of currency. It's the clout chasing, reputation focused, like big mouths who fit right in with the Bitcoin crowd. They saw an easy way to gain influence.
Yes. And there it was.
You had a cult full of idiots just ready to believe anyone who says Bitcoin is the only way. And so when you get a cult of any type, the clout chasers will run to them. They will adopt that ideology, or at least publicly, in order to gain advantage, whether it's financial or reputation or whatever else. It's personal incentive is all. They're just trying to gain from it. I wouldn't take them seriously. Now there is an argument for a single currency and not having competing currencies. It would be ideal if we didn't have to convert back and forth between, fluctuating values of different coins. It would be much simpler if we could base everything in Bitcoin. But purely from a technical perspective, that's near impossible.
Impossibility,
not to do it in a decentralized way, not without introducing a bunch of, trusted custodians, which this goes right back to the original problem. Like anytime I see people like, well, just send it, add them back for the longest time. Before like Lightning was ready, he was telling people to just use the centralized exchange to send instead of going to an alternative, an altcoin or something. Or just cash it out in US dollars and then just pay it somewhere else. And then rather than, using the obvious, like, another decentralized currency, which was less spam. But it's just, you could tell the financial incentive was there for him to promote Bitcoin only, and that's all it took. Whether it's intentional or intentional lack of morals, whatever, or if it's just he's been able to convince himself, subconsciously that it's the only real crypto. Like whatever the reasons, however much you want to credit him, it's there just end up being a huge crowd of those people who at least publicly claim that it's better to use a trusted third party than to just use an altcoin.
Right.
any introduction of a trusted third party in mind
You've abandoned the first principles.
We should not have to have centralized. If we do, like, there's nothing preventing all of the things we don't want: censorship, inflation, like, fractional reserve. Like, we all were against fractional reserve back in 2013, back in the early days of crypto. I thought it was like a core tenet of Bitcoin. It was like,
I would argue it is a core tenet.
But not to some people, because they weren't willing to give that up over, accepting that altcoins may play a role. Even if temporarily, like, they believed in the Litecoin network long term, but like temporarily when it wasn't around, they were like, nah, it's better just to use a trusted third party than an altcoin. It's like, okay. That's weird set of values you've got there, but whatever.
I agree with you. Part of me thinks the crypto community has lost its way, and that's and it's a personal opinion, right? I speak for myself, but you can compare the early days, like what you're talking about. We have, Chancellor on the brink of bank bailouts, encoded in the Genesis block of Bitcoin, an antidote to financial chaos, corruption, fraud, all sorts of issues with the modern monetary system as we know it. And, you had a lot of that. I think a few people are still around that kind of still preserve that have more of a spotlight, but some of them have disappeared over time. And it's just morphed. A lot of things have changed just with the general community. Sometimes, well, not sometimes. I feel that the Litecoin community still has more of those principles.
I agree with you. I was surprised
than Bitcoin, but we haven't been as flooded yet. So we'll see what happens in time.
Yeah, I always knew, like, early on, like, once the general masses came in, things would get pretty bad. But I just didn't realize how quickly and how terribly. Like, the whole the image, the philosophy was just lost in 2017. That was it. That was the end. You had all these people flooding crypto, trying to make a quick buck. It became,
new narratives.
It became a money grab over, a chance of a better future for everyone. And we really haven't gained it back. If anything, we've gotten much, much worse. So it's actually hard for me to continue working on it because of that. It's hard to stay motivated because I see the way, like, the community, just the whole crypto community is moving. It's just really difficult. I can make so much more money just chasing bullshit projects that provide zero utility.
Minting stolen JPEGs to your chain.
I could be rich and retired probably already, but instead I tried to focus on principles, and that would end up being a really stupid decision.
Here.
But I do it anyways.
Well, you've changed one of the most powerful cryptocurrencies on the planet. So I think that's no small business, and I think we're seeing more coming to Litecoin, whether it's for Ordinals, little blip, or for MWEB, or for what we discover. What time will tell what we need down the road, as long as it's permitted to function. And again, decentralized networks are a little more resilient than centralized ones. So, but I'm here for principles too. It can be a little bit discouraging or maybe majorly disappointing. Even look at Ron Paul. You mentioned you were on his campaign. I did volunteer with him in California back in the presidential campaign at Liberty HQ and what was that? What beach city was that? Venice Beach, I think it was. He came and visited us. We did phone banking. In fact, I met Nick Spanos there. He was our phone bank guy, and he ended up going to New York and doing the Bitcoin stuff there. I don't know him personally, but that's a fascinating connection where we were in the same room for a little while back then. And even Litecoin in 2019, Ron Paul spoke at the Litecoin Summit, and then I think it was 2022, and I had a ticket to go, but I didn't go to Miami. He spoke there. He was like the first person on the stage. It was like crickets. People didn't know who he was. There was so much chatter when he was. I'm like, this is like the godfather of sound money in our time, who's literally like did coinage hacks. Yeah. And the Fed was how I was a generalist, and I know this is non-political, and lots of people have different views when they come to the space. But like, I was not a libertarian, and I still consider a lowercase l libertarian. I still think that fits me the best in terms of a political, if I can go into a camp that makes sense. Politically, lowercase l libertarian. You know, and the Fed was the book that changed it for me. It talked about sound money in a very simple way. It talked about how the Fed worked, and I'm like, why isn't anybody talking about this? You know, and that in our generation was super big, and I think that that's inspired a lot of us.
His campaign was very eye-opening for myself and lots of other people.
Yeah,
and yeah, we've lost that. The new generation is not here for that at all. You know, I guess I'm a dinosaur these days. I didn't realize it happened so quickly, but it happened very quickly. To where it's like, oh, I'm the old guy here. These young kids actually don't have any of the same, you know, the same goals, principles, intentions as I do. What am I doing here? But alas, we push on.
But if you study Bitcoin, if you study Litecoin, if you learn about inflationism, and that's being discussed a lot because reality is forcing us to go into these, well, what is this all about? So if things continue on more people will be searching for, I think, what we are using and what we are interested in, namely Litecoin. I would add Bitcoin to that too, but I like Bitcoin, Litecoin, and Doge, the Nakamoto standard. You know, I think there's something there between the three, and let's talk about that theoretically. We had a gold standard, which was never actually a gold standard. There was always bimetallism. They tried to get bimetallism, at least in the United States situation, late 1800s. William Jennings Bryan, you know, you're not going to crucify me on a cross of gold, etc. But they were always circulating in tandem. You had a gold standard, but you also had silver coinage, and you had copper and nickel and other things. So if we want to take that, maybe it's an archaic model, but it's a framework we can understand in our mind, multiple things meeting our general needs. If we did Bitcoin, Litecoin, and for example, Dogecoin, and this could be expanded, but I'm just saying with the Nakamoto protocol, the truly decentralized currencies. And I didn't take Doge seriously for a long time, to be honest. I really didn't. But learning about it through its S-CRYPT mining, through its tail emission for Litecoin, I think there's something really neat about it. Not to mention that it's inflationary, although it is a gigantic supply, far more than 2184 million. It's still fixed inflation, which is non-arbitrary. So over time, the effects will be known less and less and less. So that's actually still sound. So I'm thinking we can, if we were to convert in a free system, not talking about CBDCs, absence of coercion, you know, in government currencies and their motives, could a Bitcoin, Litecoin, and Dogecoin service the entire planet in terms of transactional volume? I think it could more realistically than Bitcoin alone, for sure. And it would allow for some second layers for maybe the more frivolous transactions or whatever. But I'm curious of your opinion of those operating in tandem, perhaps atomic swapping between them. I think there's something that could happen, and it could facilitate world exchange.
Ideally, we would have one coin that was technically capable of handling the world's transaction volume. We do not currently have that with our available technology. At least not to do that in a decentralized way. So until we get something like that, I assume we are going to be stuck with a multi-currency world. I see nothing there that really says it has to be Bitcoin, Litecoin, and Dogecoin. Actually, I have zero interest in Dogecoin. It was running on like version 0.12.1 of Bitcoin or something up until like 6 months ago. It was basically a broken protocol. Yeah, it was a meme and always has been.
And it was created as such, to be fair. It was created as such,
you know,
yes.
Throw enough billions of dollars at something, and suddenly, like, you know, well, they've got to take protocol security and stability a little more seriously, and so you've seen they've really, you know, upped their game. They've got some newer version of the code out there, and I'm sure it works much better and the network's smoother, but for the longest time, you couldn't even really transact on it because it just didn't work. So I don't have this like big Dogecoin love or history.
There's no romance here.
Yeah.
Can you give it credit for lasting as long as it has, despite being a joke?
Yeah, I mean, that's it's impressive. There's a number of them out there, but you're right.
Yeah.
Like it is for as old as it is, and it's got a huge fan base. And it doesn't have to include Litecoin either, although I would expect it to, because Bitcoin works. You know, it's the longest running altcoin that I'm aware of. It's always just worked, and like everywhere that accepts Bitcoin and one other coin, or at least one other coin, well, they end up accepting Litecoin, Ethereum, Bitcoin Cash. Those to me are like the big four adopted cryptos.
Yeah.
And like if you were to ask me which ones I think would hang around for a while, those would be them. Even though Bitcoin Cash is kind of dying off, at least the other three are there. But regardless of how many there are and which ones there are, until we get some kind of technology that will handle the world's transaction volume in a decentralized manner, I think we're going to have to live in a multi-coin future if we want any chance of overthrowing fiat. And so from there, it's how does that work? Well, I have ideas of how I would expect that to work. I would expect there to be, whether it's a local currency or base everything off of Bitcoin or some other core currency, I would expect people to be able to store in their wallet a certain value and a certain amount of wealth, whatever that's what measured in. It could be stored in various different coins on their wallet and not have them necessarily know about it. And I would hope that you would be able to buy something when you pay for something. You could perform atomic swaps in the background based on going rates. You would need a lot of liquidity there and some stable price relationships, not fixed, but stable price relationships between the various coins for that to work. But I would hope that in the future, if we are going to have a multi-coin future, and that's a big if we're going to, I would hope that translation between them would happen automatically through, decentralized mechanisms. And this is being very, very optimistic, because realistically what will happen is we will have centralized custodians that deal with all this. But I would love that not to be the case. And we have, decentralized swaps or some sort of way of transferring, or, just like, even if we send all three coins or something at the same time, like the value, you have to, if you only have, some Litecoin, some Dogecoin, some Bitcoin in your wallet, and they can use some combination of those three to send their correct amount of value. And, that just happen automatically. I don't see a future where people are kind of like calculating on the fly. Well, I know they want 4 Bitcoin, but I have 60 Litecoin, and maybe that'd be about like,
Yeah, that would be a headache.
Whatever. No, that's not, nobody's doing that. There's going to be one that they understand. It's probably going to be US dollar or something like that. And it could be local. And it could be, it could even be the digital currency of local, each country has its own, or each town or each state, whatever size geographical region has its own. You think in value based on that. And then, I would expect the conversions to happen on
just
that.
Denominations.
Then you have the problem if you're storing a really weak currency that maybe inflates a lot faster than others, you have value loss. But ideally, you wouldn't be sticking to ones that are more stable in value. I don't know. I don't have it really worked out, but I think that if we were going to really support, all of the transactional value of the world, you're going to have some sort of automatic mechanisms for dealing with multiple assets without having to burden the user with all of the thought processes.
Absolutely agree on evolving a user experience to accommodate, but maybe it's the underlying structures, again, denominated in a local or something else. I agree with you. I think we're heading that direction, and in a free system, if permitted, we will have a solution. And then if we choose one, for example, if we choose Bitcoin, then there it is. But it's a voluntary choice that says this currency works the best because of it is what it is and it's self-evident, and there's no real excesses of propaganda, to promote it. That's where I argue with some of the maximalist Austrians, because I don't think they're compatible. But unfortunately, they're looking similar these days. Again, the louder voices, the louder
The
voices.
maximalists are, yes, they're focused on personal,
Yeah.
financial gain, almost always. Almost always. Assume that everyone in this space is doing that unless clear
Yeah.
otherwise, like, because most people
Yeah.
in this space are. They do only care about their own personal finance.
Correct.
There's not all, but it is a good majority. So
Yeah.
you really got to take everything with a grain of salt, especially with the loud influencers. The more followers, the more grain of salt.
Yeah, yeah. Well, how about this, David? We will switch to the Q&A and then we'll land the plane.
All right.
All right. Let's see. So this came in from Twitter on the 84 million Twitter. This is from PsychXL. When will everything be available to implement on mobile wallets? Thanks, appreciate it. We kind of talked about that.
It's out there. I mean, it's not released. I'm working on so there's going to be 2 releases coming. So we just had a release that had just one security fix based on some vulnerability that may exist. I don't know anything about it other than I was told this is an important fix, and it seemed like an important fix. Bitcoin has had it on their network for a while. So we released it. We took their word, and so we released a new version of Litecoin that has some security fix around a few peer-to-peer messages that take place. So if you haven't upgraded yet, you should. So that just came out, but I'm working on a release now that has a lot of bug fixes for MWEB. Some of them are just more technical based, like the build process, but then there's some around the wallet that, there's one bug where when you go and sync a wallet from the same, like a backup copy of your wallet back, sometimes the balances don't match. It's because it has like the wrong, the change isn't identified correctly or something. There's various UI bugs and things like that came about from MWEB, especially on the wallet side, which is much more complex. So there's a release coming out with that, and then after that, there's going to be we're going to try to get a new release out on based on the latest Bitcoin release, which 25 will probably be out then, but this is going to be based off 24, version 24 of Bitcoin's code. Add Litecoin on top, add MWEB on top, and then on top of that, we'll also have the new enhancements there. That's where the mobile wallet stuff will be, and that's where the hardware wallet APIs will be. That's all on version the next major release that's coming out. I don't have an exact date for that, but when it's ready. But like the code is out there if someone wants to build off of it for their wallet, or not so much for the hardware wallet side, but for the light wallet side, for the mobile wallet side. That stuff's out there. They could at least start experimenting with, give us feedback, tell us ways we can improve it before we actually release all that. But it is available.
Next Q, Master BTC LTC, Shan Baloo. What would it take to add MWEB to Trezor or Ledger?
That was the hardware wallet side. We just have some APIs that it's based off of like a special. There's like a special serialization format for Bitcoin transaction, for Litecoin transactions that hardware wallets use, and I've added an MWEB to it, and I'm testing it now. It's kind of complex. It's, there's kind of I don't know. I don't like how it turned out, so I keep changing it. But I'm honing in on on a final product there for that. But it's just APIs is what's missing, and those will be released in that release I'm talking about. And then it's just a matter of those hardware wallet companies or some some open source developer out there writing the actual specialized hardware wallet client. Yep.
Hopefully Exodus too. I know they've had a lot of favorable things to say over the past year plus about Litecoin, so I think we have friends in Exodus too. Metafungible, status on coin swaps.
Coin swaps, yeah. So I've seen, I don't know if what the current status is on Bring, but Uh, Skillio was the guy working on it. He has, from last I saw, there was like a fully functional coin swap service out there for Grin. We would have to make some changes in order to support it, but nothing crazy from what I could tell. It looked like we could just basically, we have non-interactive transactions. We have to add the stealth address portion, but it could be added. From what I could tell, I haven't officially got through all this, but like I just based on some back the envelope stuff, like it looked like we could add ours pretty easily onto that, just in addition to existing fields out there for how it works. I think we can easily add non-interactive transactions to how that's done. So, we could just base it off their code. I don't think it's anything that would be a serious undertaking. I'm busy with other stuff is the only reason I haven't. But I think that is an important thing for once we do have mobile support out there and we get real MWEB adoption. I think that'll be a good time to really look into coin swaps, and I don't think that'll take long.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Awesome. From Indigo Nakamoto, he's got 3. What is the min and max size for an MWEB block? How does the MWEB block size get adjusted? And is it possible to do an atomic swap or submarine swap with MWEB?
Give me a sec. Okay. A maximum block for MWEB is roughly 20 megs. It's more weight. It's actually weight based. We have various weights we assign to different transaction components. So these are estimates, but based on how transactions are built, it would be the absolute max would be something like 20 meg. There's currently a soft limit that at least those using Litecoin Core won't build a block that's over 2 megs, 2-ish megs. It's 20,000 weight, but it comes out to just over 2 meg. That's how Bitcoin was launched too. It would only make 250 kilobyte blocks at the beginning. It would support up to a meg, but only by default would mine 250 kilobytes. There's nothing preventing the miner from just ignoring that. And a lot of them can write their own code, so it's not a big deal. They could just go straight to the 20 megs, at the consensus layer, it's roughly 20 meg for a block, and at the at the miner level, the default miner out there that we coded is 2 megs max. And then was there something about the transaction size, or just asking
how does the MWEB block size get adjusted, and is it possible to do an atomic swap or submarine swap with MWEB?
So block adjusted, so we don't, 20 something meg is the max. There's no adjustment to that without a hard fork. But we target 2 megs or less with the very little control we have over that, which is to just basically encourage miners not to make it over 2 megs, and until we need more size there. And then atomic swaps, I don't know much about submarine swaps. I never really dug into the tech around Lightning Network. I did, for basic Lightning transactions, I understand, and the basic payment channels, and even some of the newer ways, the L2 and other technologies. But as far as the various swaps out there, there's so many different swaps. I don't even remember what submarine swaps are exactly. Unfortunately, I don't have the time to keep up with all of the many different fancy, academic only, technologies being created out there that don't seem to be used anywhere, unfortunately. But swaps are definitely possible from MWEB. You could swap with, you could do a swap with regular Litecoin, oddly enough. Even though you can just peg in and out, there may be privacy advantages to doing a swap with someone instead. You could swap with other coins. You could swap with Bitcoin. You could swap. I think you could swap with Monero because they have swaps now. Pretty much anything you can swap Bitcoin with, you can swap MWEB with. We have just enough flexibility in those transactions that you can do all kinds of different things. You could have a Lightning network on MWEB that is based entirely on MWEB, has hidden amounts, addresses, things like that. It would take some work to try, if that's someone younger, but you can definitely build an entire Lightning network that's on top of MWEB itself. So there's all kinds of different. You can do almost all of the third party, or not the like second layer, third layer type swaps and other things that you can do on Bitcoin. You could do almost all of them on MWEB. Because there's enough scripting well, there's not really any scripting capability, but there's you can use scriptless scripts, and there's enough fancy crypto solutions out there that you can piece enough together to accomplish all of those same tasks.
Let's see, what do we have next? We have 2 more questions. This is from Bake the Crypto. Did you get paid? I don't know. I know there was a QR code to support your endeavors, and if you have one for donations, let us know because we can share it. But I think that's what he means.
So early on, there is an MWEB fund that early on was funded by the community, and there was lots of donations that came in, and it paid for the first 2.5. It paid for all development up until release. Since then, it's been really hard to get donations. Charlie has covered the gap since then, but it would be really great if I didn't have to rely on a single person funding this.
Email me your if you have a tweet or if it's just an address, and I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, there's a Litecoin talk post about it with the MWEB dedicated fund here. I will send it to you though.
That sounds good. So you did get some compensation. There is a fund that's open.
There's a fund. Yeah, I was paid to work part time on this for years, and still paid. Charlie was matching the fund with 50-50 donation, but then the donation dried up, and so far he's been funding it ever since.
Yeah. Last question for you, sir. Would David Burkett 38 be considering? Would you consider to contribute to the Digibyte community? So far, that's one Bitcoin fork in which ordinals have not become a polarizing subject.
I mean, they will be. It's only a matter of time. I'm not so against ordinals that I'm ready to run away from a chain because they've added them. Spam is a problem on blockchain. Okay. And spam will exist in various forms on every blockchain. And so, running away from the first sight of spam is not, that's not going to be the thing that gets me to another coin or whatever. I'm plenty happy where I'm at now. I'm sure it's a great community. I've come across many members, whatever, but I have no intention of switching to a different. I've got plenty of work here. So
yeah. Well, good deal. Well, that's the end of our Q&A. Thanks to those who did put in some tweets. David, it's been a pleasure having you. I really appreciate your time this afternoon. I'm looking forward to uploading this one and just letting it be a part of the record of what is Litecoin, what is MWEB, your involvement, and et cetera, et cetera. So anything you want to end with?
No, I enjoyed this. Thank you. Thanks.
Pleasure, my friend. This is the first of maybe one of 84 million video content, but you're someone I wanted to talk to personally. I consider you, I don't know. I look forward to meeting you one day. I didn't make the summit last time, and of course you spoke there, and you've just done a lot of great work, and I think ideologically we can see some things similarly, so I appreciate that. But thanks for coming on. If anybody doesn't know how to find this gentleman, he's at David Burkett 38 on Twitter. That's how I found you. Is there any other channels you want to share, David?
I mean, on Telegram and everywhere else, but be patient. I'm really far behind on communication. Like, I can't express just how far behind I am. We're talking months. If you sent me a message in the past and I never responded, it's not because I hate you. Send it again and again and again. But
Yeah.
I will get back eventually.
Here, here. Well, it was a pleasure, sir. Enjoy your evening, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, thanks.
All right. Thank you, David. Bye-bye.